Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, the enablers tackling the shortage of rural housing.
Ultimately, it's about bringing forward small-scale affordable housing to our communities. And by working with social landlords, that's another opportunity then to make sure that the right type of housing gets developed, be it new developments or retrofits, refurbished premises, to make sure that there is affordable housing available for local families and individuals.
More on that later. Let's start, though, with our complex food system, which, according to a report out this week, needs to change as it's responsible for too many emissions and too much ill health. The 5-year study, which cost £47 million, was funded by UK Research and Innovation and published this week in a Royal Society journal. What might a food system transformation mean for farming here in the UK? Professor Guy Poppy is Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation at Bristol University, and he led the research.
I think what we have to realise is actually just working on maybe producing more food or trying to get people to eat, say for instance, more fruit and vegetables. It is very good, but it's important that that's done in the right way so that you don't affect something else in the system. And so that's why we really encourage people, if they're thinking about trying to get fruit and vegetables on people's diets, how we might use innovation to grow the fruit and vegetables of the future, rather than trying to do it in the ways of the past, which sometimes has consequences.
So at farm level then, what sorts of changes are you envisaging?
Well, everyone is very keen on this concept of regenerative agriculture, for instance. And one of the things that we have set up is some trials which are beginning to try to gather some evidence. So what is it you want to try to create in the soil, which actually really does lead to a more regenerative agricultural system? In terms of other farming, we were introducing, for instance, this is an interesting project based in the southwest, to use anaerobic digestion based on livestock manure, coupled with farm warehouses to try and recreate breeding king prawns in big tanks, so that provides a protein source which doesn't involve importing prawns from Indonesia and mangrove forests.
And actually, you talk about a regenerative food system in this report. What does that mean?
Well, what that means is beginning to try and share good practice so that people perhaps who are working in the farming world can think about, how to regenerate the soil, but at the same time address aspects around waste or address aspects around how they might work with communities to make sure that supply chains are shortened. And so it's this aspect that rather than just focusing in on regenerative agriculture, that's all about looking after my soil, one thinks about a more sustainable system right from when the farmers produce the food right to when we're consuming it.
Does that mean then less meat, more pulses? Because farmers will point out the UK is good at growing animals. Pulses are very tricky to grow here.
One of the projects, in fact, actually is focused in on how you might introduce more beans into the diets, because there are many benefits to that. And that is actually working on beans which grow very well in the south of England and can be incorporated into that. We're not talking about replacing livestock farming here. We're talking about actually trying to look at ways in which one can reduce some of the climate aspects associated with how we rear animals at the moment, how we might incorporate other types of protein into our diet, so we kind of increase the options and aren't just reliant on one thing, because we all know that if you're reliant on one thing and then something happens in the system, then that can mean that we're all short of the supply that we need.
Professor Guy Poppy. A double whammy of party conferences this weekend, with the Liberal Democrats meeting in Bournemouth and the DUP in Belfast. We'll be hearing about all the parties' plans for the UK's rural areas over the next few weeks. The Lib Dems meeting runs until Tuesday, so we'll hear from them next week. As the BBC's Ireland correspondent Chris Page explains, agriculture is important to Northern Ireland's economy, and so will be discussed at its parties' conferences. Sinn Féin's in April and the DUP's tomorrow.
It's a very important industry in Northern Ireland, the agri-food industry in this part of the UK, proportionally bigger than many other regions. So political parties certainly very keen to appeal to farmers, to try to keep the issues on the agenda. So the Democratic Unionist Party, who are the first party to hold their conference, well, their priority is that they say direct farm payments should keep track with inflation to maintain levels of funding from before 2020. 2020. They say they want to make farming more profitable with a focus on encouraging longer-term land leasing and rental arrangements through tax relief. And also they want the UK government to source at least half of food into the public sector from British farms, including, of course, farms in Northern Ireland.
And how does that compare then with Sinn Féin's approach?
Well, Sinn Féin's approach, I think in general terms, it's different in one way in particular, and that is around the whole area of climate change and action towards net zero. The DUP says it wants the road to net zero to be fair rather than fast. Sinn Féin, though, really, I suppose, more looking at things along the lines of, well, they want net zero to be looked upon by farmers as being something of an opportunity, so that they should be enabled to make the most of more sustainable farming methods as Sinn Féin sees it. Something that unites the DUP and Sinn Féin, Northern Ireland's two biggest parties, is that they're both strongly opposed to the UK government's proposals for inheritance tax in relation to farms. They say that Northern Ireland would be disproportionately affected by that measure. And also Sinn Féin as an Irish nationalist party, well, they say they want an all-Ireland commission on the future of the Irish family farm. They say that's a particularly important model. And they say they want this commission to ensure that the family farm survives and thrives, and that should be done on an all-Ireland basis rather than something that could be managed from Westminster and even just from the devolved government in Belfast.
Of course, the man in charge in Northern Ireland of agriculture, Andrew Muir, is actually from the Alliance Party, isn't he?
Yes, that's right. The agriculture portfolio has been held by Sinn Féin and the DUP in the past, but presently it is held by the Cross Community Alliance Party, a party that is neither unionist nor nationalist. It is neutral on the question of Northern Ireland's place in the UK. Really, the system of power sharing that we have in Northern Ireland is nothing if not complicated. And although Andrew Muir is currently the Agriculture Minister, well, it doesn't mean he can do really whatever he wants around agriculture and environmental policy. He has got to have the consent, really, of the two main parties in the Northern Ireland Assembly. One particularly controversial matter at the moment is an updated nutrients action plan for Northern Ireland. So that aims to reduce water pollution from agricultural sources. There's been a huge issue here in the last 2 years around the growth of blue-green algae on Loch Ness, which is not only Northern Ireland's largest lake, but the largest freshwater lake in the whole of the UK. So Andrew Muir has said this new plan, which he's put out to consultation, is designed to deal with the water pollution from farming sources that is contributing towards that problem. But his ideas have been opposed by farmers, and just before the Assembly's summer break, well, the DUP brought forward a motion calling for Mr Muir to go back to the drawing board, as it were, on the Nutrients Action Plan, and Sinn Féin and some other parties backed that motion. So that, I think, will continue to be a source of difference, a source of dispute as that consultation proceeds this autumn.
BBC News' Ireland correspondent Chris Page. The lack of affordable housing has long been a barrier to people living and working in rural areas. The Rural Services Network described it this year as a rural housing emergency. Well, all this week we've been looking at rural services, from buses to health, and today it's housing. We've reported before on some of the issues: planning, second homes and high prices, for instance. Today, Sally Challoner reports on one of the solutions. Rural housing enablers are funded by the devolved UK governments to bridge the gap between local need and getting homes built. Sally went to Cribbin, a village in Ceredigion, to find out how they work.
This is Cribbin, less than half an hour from beautiful Cardigan Bay, once a thriving village with 2 pubs, a post office, shops and a primary school. Those have long since gone, and with prices in this part of Wales out of the reach of many locals, it's become something of a commuter village. But rural housing enabler Keith Hudson wants to change that, thinking outside the box, to bring families back. He works alongside the not-for-profit housing association, Barcud.
Ultimately, it's about bringing forward small-scale affordable housing to our communities. And by working with social landlords, that's another opportunity then to make sure that the right type of housing gets developed, be it new developments or retrofits, refurbished premises, to make sure that there is affordable housing available for local families and individuals to stay within their communities.
And getting hold of funding as well, because there is money there to be had, isn't there?
There is money out there. There is money out there. It's about identifying the right sources. And sometimes it's just about questioning the fact, well, why doesn't that funding enable this to take place? And if it's said, or because that's what it says on the box, well, let's change the instructions.
What are some of the examples then of successes as a housing enabler?
I think one of the great examples at the moment is in Crymych in North Pembrokeshire. Barcade Housing Association have developed 42 units there. 20 for social housing by working again with Pembrokeshire County Council there. Then there's 22 units being let / sold on a shared ownership example. Tenants, residents can buy between 25 and 75% of the property, and then they rent the remainder, making it very, very affordable.
Now, we've actually come to an example here, haven't we? This is an old school from the 1880s, I think, that is now empty and being brought back into use. And I know the old schoolhouse are going to turn into a house, aren't you?
Yes, that's the aim of the community.
Let's go and have a look. This community came together with Keith's help to raise money and access grants to buy the school, aiming to redevelop the hall into a community hub and the old schoolhouse into a family home. Heading up the group is Euros Lewis.
One of the important things in rural communities is somebody needs to lead, and that doesn't mean knowing what to do. It means saying, OK, why don't we try this?
You're going to need to be creative in here. We're in the old schoolhouse. The roof is tatty, can I say? Lots of damp on the walls. You've got your work cut out to make this into a home.
Well, it's part of the challenge, but turning this part of the school back into being a home for a local community was just the obvious thing to do.
And how can you control that only a local young family can move in?
I think you have to go back to Keith to get the lowdown on that.
Yeah, as a rural housing enabler, you identify the types of properties that are out there. By working with a registered social landlord, again, such as Barcade, for example, I know they've got a number of sites where they've actually developed local lettings policy, which looks at the local connection, how long they've lived here, how long they've worked here, is there a family connection, etc. So we are seeing families move back because there is a connection there.
Councils across the UK can also now charge a council tax premium on second homes that are mostly empty during the year. Keith says that's also making a difference as those are sold up.
Currently, depending on the number of years that a home has been empty for, if it's been up to 5 years, there's 100% premium. Over 5 years and including 10 years, 150% premium. And then over 10 years, 200% premium. But we are seeing a reduction, especially in the longer term ones.
But then local people can't buy those homes up.
There are funding opportunities available, either through the local authority, Welsh Government. At the moment, Ceredigion County Council offer a community housing scheme where they provide equity funding, interest-free. So that enables, again, local people. There's got to be a local connection to actually purchase properties on the open market, but where they probably can't get it on that mortgage availability. So that's an opportunity there.
Keith Hudson. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.